With Shimei came to Solomon. He said, "What should I do?" He said, "I know your dad was angry with me. Please don't kill me." Solomon said, "I make a deal with you." He said, "Long as you stay in your house outside of Jerusalem," he said, "and you don't cause me any problems, I won't cause you a problem." He said, "But the minute you leave your house, I'm going to kill you." And as the story goes, Shimei gets upset because a slave runs away from his house. And when word comes to Solomon that the slave has run away and Shimei has chased him, Solomon calls Benaiah and he says, "Fall on him." And, after killing these guys, the reign of Solomon is peaceful. Now, for the first 4 years, Solomon is getting his house in order. He's killing the people who had caused his father's problems. He's assembling his team. And 4 years later, Solomon begins the process of the construction of the temple. Now, let me put the construction of the temple of God for Solomon in perspective. David always wanted to build a house for the Lord, but God told him, "No, you're not the one to build my house because you're a warrior. You got blood on your hands." Solomon was not a warrior, he was a lover. Solomon had about 1,000 wives, and he was strategic in choosing wives. He married a daughter of Pharaoh in Egypt. He married daughters of the neighboring nations like Lebanon and Tyre. And how is a potential rival going to want to fight you when you've married their daughter? And so Solomon extended the kingdom, the boundaries of Israel, and I don't think Israel has enjoyed peace like it did during the time of Solomon, even to this day. You think about Jordan, Tyre, Lebanon, Iraq and Iran. But Solomon, in his time, married daughters from many of those countries, and he had peace. And so what I want to talk about is commitment. In the life of Solomon, he made a commitment to the Lord. And his commitment was to build a house to the Lord. When he builds a house to the Lord, it's like a house none other anybody at that time had ever seen. The house is made of the cedars of Lebanon. And what Solomon did was he conscripted 30,000 men from all the tribes of Israel. He broke them into 3 groups. And they took shifts, 1 month on in Lebanon, 1 month off, so that they could come back home. And when his men would bring all these cedars of Lebanon home, in my reading of the Bible, I'm not sure how long that really took. And because it doesn't tell us how long it really took, it may have only taken a year. I'm not really sure. But the thing that I do know is that he had 30,000 men who hauled the wood, the cedars of Lebanon, back to Jerusalem. And then he conscripted 150,000 laborers from the inhabitants of the land. Now you think about that. These are probably slaves that he has conscripted. And it took them 20 years to build. The house of the Lord that Solomon constructed was made out of cedar wood. But then on top of the cedar wood, he overlaid it with gold. He had the cherubim and the seraphim in that temple. And once it was completed, he brought an altar, had an altar constructed there right in that house to the Lord that was made of cedar wood overlaid with gold. Now the text tells us that after not before, not during, but after Solomon had the temple constructed, he had a house for himself constructed. Now, unlike the house to the Lord was of cedar wood overlaid with gold. The house of Solomon also was cedar wood, but it was overlaid with brass. And think about that. I think he overlaid his own house with brass because he didn't want to compete with the house of the Lord. Now, that's a whole nother sermon. But that was 24 years into his kingdom, his kingship. And so in that 24th year, Solomon calls together all the leaders of Israel, and he tells them, now devote yourselves unto the Lord, keeping all of his statutes, keeping all of his ways. And that's what I'm preaching about today. Solomon is calling the leaders of Israel to make a commitment. He's making a commitment not to him, but a commitment to the Lord. And I want you to think for a moment about what does it mean to have a commitment. I had a conversation this week with two young ministers. I don't even think they know each other. Both of them are senior ministers of churches. And both of them feel like, well, one of them feels like he's getting kicked in the pants by his congregation. The other one, if he's telling me the truth, it doesn't feel that he's being abused and misused by his church. But rather in his situation, he's just ready to move on. And, he's been there a good while. According to him, he's done a great job. He's tripled his membership, tripled the revenue. And he's wondering, is this now the time to move on? So you got him on one hand, you have the other fellow who feels like he's being abused and misused, and they're talking to me. Both, I didn't seek them out. They called me. And when they called me, what I talked to them about was making a commitment to the Lord. Making a commitment to the Lord and making a commitment to your pastorate. And I told them, I said, look, I'm going into my 37th year as senior minister and my 46th year as a pastor, all at the same church. I said, the church where I serve as pastor, I used to be a youth leader before I made the formal decision to go into the ministry. And I said, and I want to tell you something about that commitment. Because I've committed to the long haul at my church. And I said, I didn't really think too deeply about it. I said, I got married at 24. My wife was 24. She had one more year of law school. We were just living the life of Riley, having fun. I said, but when we became 30, my wife was elected as a state court judge. And when she became elected as a judge, I just ratcheted down my life. I just said, I'm going to settle in. I'm going to be comfortable as an assistant minister of the church, and I'm not going to fight it. My father, who was the senior minister who had brought me back to Detroit to work for him, he asked me, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, Dad, I'm fine. I said, Denise is a judge, and I don't want to do anything to disrupt that. And my father just shook his head. He thought, I think there was something wrong with me. And then in my 8th or 9th year, during a deacon meeting, my dad got angry. Somebody said something he didn't like. And he looked at them and he said, I think I've been here too long. He got up and he walked out. And when he walked out of the meeting, I'm just sitting there with the deacons, and I'm wondering, what do I do now? I said, if I left the church right now to take another church, I was at that stage of life. I was 33, 34 years of age. I said, there were churches that were calling me up. And we had churches that came to our church to interview me. But I made a conscious decision. I said, my commitment is to Plymouth United Church of Christ. And I said, my commitment is to Plymouth Church. I said, because my wife has a dream job. And I'm not going to do anything to jeopardize that. And that's really how I became the senior minister of the church. You know, we had a national search. We went through the United Church of Christ process to find a minister. And, you know, some of my detractors at Plymouth United Church of Christ couldn't understand why the pastors of the biggest churches in the United Church of Christ did not want to even apply at Plymouth. And I didn't have the heart to tell them. I said, look, you know, I've been working for the national church the whole time. I've been working at Plymouth Church. I said, I am the bag man for the national church. I said, I'm the guy who's, you know, I'm writing reports and making a recommendation to give each of these churches $10,000 so that they can hire associate ministers. I said, all of these guys and women, they know me. I said, they're not going to challenge me. I knew that back then. But I had already made a commitment to the Lord through the church. And what I shared with these two young ministers on the telephone was I said, you know, there's some things you can enjoy if you commit yourself to the church that you can't experience any other way. I told them the same story I told you all last week. I said, in October, a young woman called me from Atlanta and told me she was going into labor and asked me if I would pray for her. A few weeks ago, another young woman in Detroit had her husband to call me and say, pray for my wife. She's going into labor. And, you know, I could only experience that because I've made a long-term commitment. I've known the one in Atlanta since she was about 2 years old. The one in Detroit, she's about the age of my children. And I've known her for a long time. The moderator of my church right now is a younger woman who I confirmed when she was 12 years of age. Think about what I'm just saying. What I'm saying is I don't think I could enjoy that experience, those experiences, unless I had made a commitment to the church. And my commitment to the church, my friends, starts with a commitment to the Lord.